Well, hello. I want to bring out one particular point to you today because when you're talking about leading teams and organizations in a rapidly changing environment, there's times when the people at the point of attack have to make very time critical and immediate decisions, and they can't do that by going and having a meeting with the staff or calling up the manager or whatever. Let me ask you this. When you think of the team that reports to you right now, do you have the confidence in them to do that? If not, why not? Are you developing them adequately? The key point on this also is that those kind of decisions often have to be thought through well before the point of attack. Are your people looking at it from the foresight that says, here's what could come in here? If it's the worst thing that happens today, what's that going to look like? And are we ready for it? What are we going to do about it when that happens? That's a key aspect of developing your teams in a rapidly changing environment. Give you a quick example that's a story from my military days in the fighter squadron. We had a gentleman that was one of the fighter jocks in our squadron. His name was Ghost Alexander. Ghost was his nickname. And his nickname was Ghost because his hair was completely pure white. Not a speck of gray in it or whatever. That's how he got his nickname. But we were actually deploying as a squadron one time to Carrick, Denmark, just on a normal peacetime deployment for practice and all of that back in the Cold War days. And the fighters, as we would go across the Atlantic Ocean, would have to be refueled all the way across because they didn't have the gas to get there like transport airplanes would or something of that nature. And it was interesting because you would take turns as to who was on the refueling boom getting gas. And on one point, when Ghost was on the boom, he lost oil pressure on one engine. And so he had to pull that engine back, and they ended up actually having to shut it down. But now he had just refueled, so he was at max weight. He had max loading on the airplane, under the wings and all of that. And he literally did not have the ability to stay airborne at that speed. The nearest airport, the nearest base that he could get to was Keflavik Naval Air Station, Iceland, and it was 600 miles away. So doing exactly the right thing, he turned straight for Keflavik and he started a descent. In pilot terminology, what we call a single engine drift down, where you basically maintain a certain speed until you get to the point where the airplane can kind of level off. Well, for Ghost, that was 1,500 feet above the water, 600 miles out in the Atlantic Ocean. Not a good situation. And he didn't have the gas to get all the way there. So here's the thing. One of the things that happened was one of the refueling tankers, without going and getting orders, without getting protocol or anything like that, left the formation and went after him. This was a key decision because had he gone after them and other F-4s run out of gas and hit the ocean, that would have been a bad decision. That didn't happen. So it turned out to be a really good decision. But in the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean, you got two airplanes looking for each other. And the tanker, by pure blind accident, or you could call it divine grace, I suppose, the tanker ended up flying right over the top of Ghost's F-4. And they were able to talk the tanker back so he could slow down because they couldn't push it up with one engine. They had to take the tanker, talk him back so that they could hook up. And the tanker would drag him up until he got a brute force disconnect. And they would both go into a descent, hook up again, drag him up, disconnect. And they did that for 600 miles until the tanker dropped them off on final approach at Keflavik, Iceland. Saved the day. It was huge. The reason it was so huge, and it calls attention to one aspect, particularly when you're talking about a changing environment, one that isn't as predictable as we like to think sometimes. It's key to understand that sometimes your people have to make very key decisions at the point of attack, and they can't call you to get permission. They have to make the call and make it the right call at the point of attack. And again, lives can be at risk in some cases depending on where you're involved with. And the bottom line is, are your teams ready for that?